Development of the tongue. The tongue develops from multiple swellings that arise from different pharyngeal arches. Before knowing these swellings, we first divide the tongue into anterior 2/3, posterior 1/3 and the posteriormost part of the tongue. The medialmost part of the first pharyngeal arch, also called as the mandibular arch, grows to form two swellings called the lingual swellings. These are partially separated from each other by another midline swelling called tuberculum impar. There is also another swelling that is seen in relation to the second, third and the fourth pharyngeal arches. This swelling is called the hypobranchial eminence. It is further subdivided into a cranial part and a caudal part. The cranial part is related to the second and the third pharyngeal arches, while the caudal part is related to the fourth arch. Now, let us start with the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. It develops from three swellings, namely two lingual swellings and one tuberculum impar. We have already discussed about the origin of these swellings. So, the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is formed by the fusion of the two lingual swellings and the tuberculum impar. However, tuberculum impar does not contribute significantly in the development of the tongue. Hence, we can say that the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is derived from the first pharyngeal arch. Then we move to the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. It develops from the cranial part of the hypobranchial eminence. The third arch overgrows the second arch. So, the posterior 1/3 of the tongue is mainly formed by the third pharyngeal arch. Then we move to the extreme back of the tongue, that is the posteriormost part of the tongue. The caudal part of the hypobranchial eminence, or in that sense, the fourth pharyngeal arch, forms the posteriormost part of the tongue and the epiglottis. Coming to the development of the musculature of the tongue, they are derived from the occipital somites and are supplied by the hypoglossal nerve. One exception is the palatoglossus muscle, which is supplied by the vagus nerve. Moving to the clinical conditions that are related to the embryology of the tongue, too large tongue is called macroglossia, too small tongue is called microglossia, and absence of tongue is called aglossia. Ankyloglossia, also known as tongue tie, is a common condition where the lingual frenulum, which is the tissue present under the tongue, is short and tight. Due to this, the tongue cannot move freely. It can interfere with speech. A red, rhomboid-shaped area may be present on the tongue. It is likely caused by the failure of regression of the tuberculum impar. So, to summarize, the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is derived from the first pharyngeal arch, the posterior 1/3 from the third arch as the second arch is buried, and the posteriormost part is from the fourth arch. And that wraps up a high-yield overview of the development of the tongue.